everybody. I'm Lara Trump, coming to you from Studio 45 at Trump Tower in New York City. To support their case for impeachment, the Democrats hosted a circus sideshow in Congress featuring special counsel Robert Mueller. It's the latest act of presidential harassment by the Democrats. Joining me with his insights on the Mueller hearing is a former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Joe DiGenova. Joe, what a time to have you on. It was quite a spectacle in Washington, D.C., to say the least, but thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So after submitting his report to the Attorney General, Robert Mueller claimed he had nothing else to say on the matter. So why then did he appear before Congress, especially when he was clearly not in command of the details of his own investigation?
Well, that's a very good question, and I have no idea why he did it other than to give himself some more publicity as he went out the door. But I must say it was a disaster. This was one of the most incompetent performances by a public official I've ever seen. And as far as being a former prosecutor, which is what I am, I was embarrassed for our profession. He had no command of the facts. He had no command of the law. He couldn't hear. Obviously, he has some motor problems. I think it was just a horrendous event. I think it helped the president tremendously, but it showed how bad Mueller was, that he didn't really conduct the investigation. He didn't write the report. I mean, it's one thing if he didn't write the report. At least he could have read it. But he apparently didn't even read it. He didn't know what Fusion GPS was. He didn't know who Glenn Simpson was. This was an amazing moment of ignorance, incompetence, and just awful, awful public policy performance.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to look at this for what it is and why we ended up here. And I think to a lot of Americans out there, they still see that the Democrats have still not accepted the results of the 2016 election. They still have not, in many cases, accepted the findings of the Mueller report. And so to many people, I think this looked like the last-ditch attempt by the Democrats maybe to try and impeach the president, maybe to try and sway the election their way in 2020. But do you think that they maybe regret, the Democrats, hosting this whole sideshow?
I think they do. I think they expected more from Mueller. They obviously didn't spend any time interviewing him. If they had seen him in person, apparently they dealt with intermediaries and never spoke with him directly. If they had interviewed him or talked to him, I think they would have never held these two hearings. This was clearly an embarrassing moment for the Democrats. They tried to explain it last night by simply changing the subject and talking about things that weren't even testified to at the hearing. They basically just talked about the report, which Americans have had for a long time and either knew what was in it or didn't care what was in it because they'd already made up their minds. Yesterday was an embarrassment for the Democratic Party, but I think more than that, it was an embarrassment to Bob Mueller, who just looked awful, sounded awful, and didn't appear to know what he was talking about.
It should come as no surprise that the president wanted to weigh in and had a little something to say in response to this circus. Let's take a look at what he said.
We've done a great job, and we've done it under this terrible, phony cloud, a phony cloud, that's all it was. And they should be ashamed of themselves, absolutely ashamed. And you know who knew it was a phony cloud more than anyone else? Was Schiff and Nadler and Schumer and Pelosi, every one of them. They all knew it was phony stuff.
All right, Joe, what did you think about the president's reaction?
Bravo, Mr. President. As usual, he hit it right on the head and hit it out of the park. The president is absolutely correct. This has been a mirage from the beginning, a hoax, a witch hunt, whatever you want to call it. It was a brazen plot designed to dethrone a duly elected president of the United States because the Democrats were upset that their candidate, Hillary Clinton, didn't get elected because she ran one of the worst campaigns in the history of the Republic. The president was right on the money. It's been a fraud from the beginning, the investigation.
All right, so recently, 137 Democrats actually voted against a resolution for impeachment. Do you think they're delusional enough to start impeachment proceedings in the House at this point, especially after the Mueller hearings were such a disaster?
They are delusional. These people want all the power. They control the House of Representatives, and look how they are not running it. Look at the inactivity. Look at the lack of accomplishment. Nothing but subpoenas, investigations, multiple committees, going to court to enforce subpoenas that courts are not going to enforce, criminal contempt citations which are completely unjustified. These are the signs of an out-of-control Democratic Party run by people who are frightened of the left wing of their party. They can't accommodate the left-wing socialists in their party. So what's ahead is war within the Democratic Party, war against the president, and a crazy, wild attempt to go after impeachment. I'm not sure whether they can accomplish getting to a vote on impeachment again, but the nuts in their party want to do it.
So, Joe, what does all this mean for Nancy Pelosi and the power that she has within her caucus?
Well, she's going to be challenged. She is being challenged. The four crazy ladies who make up something called the Squad, who hate America, don't love our democracy, want to change it, want to give us socialism, are putting tremendous pressure on Pelosi, who for all of her left-wing San Francisco politics is in fact a traditional raise millions of dollar money Democrat and beat the Republicans with cash. She still has control, but it's unclear whether or not she'll be strong enough to resist the type of groundswell that the center of gravity of their party is on the left side of the earth. And I'm just not sure she can resist it forever.
Joe, you're right. The radicals seem to have totally hijacked the Democrat Party. I don't think anybody can argue against that. But don't you think that Americans have more respect for the rule of law than to accept the Democrats' continued unfounded attacks against the president?
Absolutely. The Americans accept the presumption of innocence. The Democrats do not. Americans accept due process. The Democrats do not. What the Democrats have done is when they lose, they want to change the rules. So now losing includes changing the Constitution. They want to abolish the Electoral College. When you go back and look at the crazy ideas that they have put forth as a result of just losing an election, can you imagine if they had control of the Senate and the White House, what they would do? This is a cautionary tale to the American people. Take the House back from the Democrats, leave the White House in the hands of Donald Trump, and the Senate in the hands of Mitch McConnell. If you don't, you'll get chaos in a democracy, which is now the greatest economic engine in the history of the world. And the Democrats don't like success. That's what this is all about.
Yep, you got that right. And that is the goal, as you just stated, for 2020. White House, House, and Senate. We want all of them for the Republican Party. So, Joe, thank you so much for joining me today. We always appreciate your insights, and especially as we look back at these Mueller hearings. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
The Mueller hearings were a disaster for the Democrats. Incredibly, that still won't stop the worst case of presidential harassment in history. That's the real news for today. I'm Laura Trump from Studio 45 at Trump Tower in New York City. Thanks for joining us, everybody.